Okay, so we're just going to go over a couple more HTML elements before we start adding some CSS. One thing that I do want to show before we do that is we wrote a bunch of HTML on Tuesday, so I wanted to go over creating the HTML from scratch. But when you're making new pages, you can copy and paste this HTML instead of rewriting the whole thing. But there's also some plugins that are really useful for writing HTML. One of them is called Emmet. So we looked at the command palette on Tuesday, and if you go to the command palette again, so if you click on command palette and type install again, just like we did for the Sublime server, and hit enter. If you type in Emmet, E-M-M-E-T, oh, I guess it doesn't. Okay, I'm not seeing Emmet. Let's Google. Maybe it's not, doesn't exist anymore. I still use it on mine. Oh, maybe I already have it installed. That's what I keep forgetting. Yeah, I already have it installed. So let me uninstall it real quick. Here we go. Okay, so now if I go to Tools, Command Palette, and Install, and hit Enter, and then type in Emmet, there we go. So this is a plugin that we can use that does a lot of stuff for us. And so when I install it, you'll see this installation plugin. And I'll show you guys a couple ways that we can use this. So one, let's say we wanted to make a new HTML page. So I save this as, let's call this example.html. Using Emmet, instead of writing all of my HTML from scratch, I can use shortcuts. So one that's really convenient is HTML:5. This is going to create this default document for me. So if I hit the tab key, it's going to generate all this HTML for me. So now I don't have to write all of this stuff from scratch. It kind of generated the basic stuff that I need. You can see that it's pretty similar to the document we created. There's a couple of differences, but it has the same meta char set. It has this viewport thing, which is something that we can talk about later. There's the title, there's the head section, and the body section. So it's pretty much exactly what we wrote on Tuesday, but now I can do it just by saying HTML:5 and hitting tab. So it's much easier. And then I can also do things like adding, if I want to add in a paragraph, I can just hit P and then hit tab. Or if I want to add in an H1, I can just type H1 and then hit tab. If I want to add like 3 paragraphs, I can say P times 3, and that's going to create 3 new paragraphs for me. So there's a lot of different shortcuts using Emmet that are really useful. You don't have to use it, but I find it very convenient for creating HTML quickly. So let's leave this here. Let's go back to our index.html. And so we have this like big image. We're going to resize this using CSS. And we have our menu. So we have a link to the class site, which is an external link, and a link to our about page. And then we also need to add some links to start our choose your own adventure story. So I'm just going to create these to start, but I'm not going to actually make the content yet. We'll do that next week. So the way that I'm going to set this up, last week we created these links using the anchor tags, or on Tuesday, and the anchor tags are associated with this text. But we can also associate an anchor tag with an image, so we can wrap this entire big image around with an anchor tag. So, actually, before we do that, one thing I also wanted to show is a comment. So if I want to make a comment in HTML, this is like some text that doesn't actually show up on the website, but explains what we're looking at. And there's a shortcut to do that in Sublime, which is Command Option question mark, and it creates our HTML comment. And so an HTML comment is just an angle bracket with a exclamation point and 2 dashes. And then everything after this will not be read by the website. So if I go down here and I put another 2 dashes, this is actually going to make those links disappear. So that's not what we're going to use it for now. It is actually convenient for doing stuff like that. Like if you're like, I'm not sure that I want this menu to be here, I can put the menu inside a comment. And so the menu text will be gone. And so that way you can remember what this is, but you don't necessarily need the text there. But what I usually use comments for is to explain what the different parts of my code are. So this is an external link. You know, if I'm doing a demo like this, I might use comments to explain what these different sections are doing. This is an internal link. So remember the difference between an external and an internal link. An external link goes to a page that's on a different site. And we can tell because it starts with the beginning of the URL, https, and openlab.bmcc.cuny.edu. So this URL is different from where our website is, which is just localhost 8080. An internal link just links to a page that's part of our website. So we don't need all of the beginning of this. We just need the name of the file that we want to load. So comments are useful for explaining what's going on in the code, but not having it actually show up on the site itself. So if I'm a developer and I'm looking at somebody else's code to get a sense of how it works, if they have good comments, it makes it a lot easier for me to understand what's going on in the code and why they're doing certain things. So comments are really important regardless of what language you might be using. Okay, so let's put a link around our image, and then we'll add another image as an example. And I'm going to make this image a little bit smaller just so it's not so crazy. We can resize it with CSS later, but if I have an image, this one is like 1024 by 1185. I can resize it in the browser, but that's not going to look that good. If I want it to maintain the same resolution, I can open it in Photoshop or really any program. And let's go to the defaults. Workspace, essentials, reset essentials. So I'm going to go to image, image size. And I'm just going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it like, let's go with 600 for the width. I might want it even smaller than that, honestly. I'll go with 600 for the height. And I'm going to hit OK. And I don't want to save this because it's going to overwrite the larger image that I have. So I want to save as. And I want to save it on my computer. And so I'm just going to put self-portrait 600. So I know this is the smaller one. And say OK. And so then if I want to switch that image, I just have to go into my HTML and add in 600 here to match that file. Okay, so now the image is smaller, so I can see a little bit more. And so we can also make this image a link. So the way that HTML works is we have these different elements with different functionalities, and we can put some elements inside of other elements. So just like I have this anchor tag with the text inside, I can make an anchor tag that goes around my image. So I can do curly bracket A, and then on the other side of the image over here, I can do Command Option period to close the curly bracket, or I can just write the closing bracket and a / and Sublime will fill it in for me. And so now I don't have a link yet, but my image will have a link, so I can say href. So remember, href is the hypertext reference, so that's where I want this link to go. And I haven't actually created my story yet, but I'm just going to start making up these links, and I'll fill them in with HTML later. So for the first part of my story, I'll just call this part1.html. And so now if I click on the image, it goes to part1.html. And so I can make my images as well as my text links to other things. So I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm just going to copy and paste the same thing. I might replace the image later. And this one will go to part2.html. Okay, so now I have part 1 and I have part 2. And so we'll fill those in later. For now, I want to add a couple more HTML elements, and then we will add some styles. Let's pause for a second. Any questions, or does anybody need help getting this set up? You got it working? You're trying to do what? Is it too big, or?
I don't know. I think I made it small somewhere.
Is it not loading on the page?
It was there.
Okay. So remember to close the anchor tag at the end. But other than that, it looks good. All right. Okay. Do you have an image to add in there? Okay, remember to use the Creative Commons. So go to usage, Creative Commons. Okay, so you have to type it in. So source equals quotation marks, and then the name of the image. Don't forget the dot before JPEG. And then get rid of that. The delete, yeah. The equals. Okay. And save, Command S. Okay. So I think that's just the thumbnail, but if you want to click on it, if you want a bigger image, it doesn't really matter, but if you click on that one, and if you scroll down, there should be like a download link. You probably go that way. Yeah, so yeah, medium or small is fine. All right. So once we start adding CSS, one thing that we're going to want to have is some other elements to organize our content. Right now, we just kind of have a lot of stuff on the page. We have like a header, we have a paragraph, we have a menu, then we have these links. But they're all just kind of there. They're not really organized in any way. If you ever look at a website or read a magazine or look at anything with any kind of design, you'll notice that things are grouped into different sections. So like if we look at NewYorkTimes.com, there's a lot of stuff here. Like we can see this menu up here is one long row. There's another row here. There's like the 3 columns of this main section here. There's 3 columns in this main section here. So there's a lot of organization that's happening stylistically in the layout. And it's a lot easier to do that if we divide our different sections in our HTML. And so the way that we can do this, there's a few different ways to do it. The way that we used to do it is using this element called a div. And div stands for division. So we're dividing our content up into different parts. And we used to say things like div ID gets header, and then we would wrap all of the header content in that div. And I can move this over a little bit. And so now when I go to my page, I'm going to open up the elements. And actually, just to review, the way that I did that is on Mac in Chrome, I hit Command-Option-J, and that opens up these developer tools. You can also just right-click and go to, right-click and go to Inspect, or you can go to View, Developer, and Inspect Elements. And this shows you everything on the website. And the thing that's cool about Chrome, and a lot of the other browsers have this now as well, is that I can make changes here and see how it affects things. But see, now I have this div ID header. So now all of the content up here is in this one section. So I can style that section separately from the other sections on my page. So this is how everything used to look, but when HTML5 was first created, they created these things called semantic tags. So they replaced certain common things like a header, like the heading of the page, with semantic tags like header. So now we can just use that. We don't have to use an attribute to change, to specify what section it is. So now I can just put header in here. And when I reload this, now it just says header. So it's a little bit easier to read. And we can see this is the header section of the website. So then this part with my content, we might want to style that as well. And so there's a few different things we can use here. For a simple website like this, I'll just use main. And once I put something inside the main section, I want to make sure to indent everything here. And then I'll close the main section. So notice that when I put my content into a new section like this, I want to indent all of that content over so it's easy to see. Here's where the header starts, here's everything that's in the header, and then here's where the header ends. If I didn't indent the content, if it was all like over here, then it's harder to read because it just looks like a big long line of stuff. So when we're creating HTML pages, as they get more complicated, we want to create more structure. Another thing that is convenient in Sublime, if you hover over the numbers on the left side, you'll see these little drop-down arrows, and you can actually collapse the parts of the document visually. So if I want to focus on the body section, I can collapse the head section. And if I want to focus on the main section, I can collapse the header section. And so that code isn't getting deleted, but we're just getting rid of it visually so that we can focus on a different part of our code. So that's a convenient way to change the view that you have of the code. So now we have the header section and the main section. And so we have our 2 main sections. I also want something that holds both of those sections together. And so usually that's called a container. And for this one, I'll usually use div ID equals container. And I'll talk about what this means in a bit. So I'm going to put both my header section and my main section inside this container. So I'm going to close this div down here. And then I'm going to indent everything here. So it can be kind of tedious to indent all of this stuff. One way that I do it, is I select everything that I want to indent. And then I just hold Command. And I hit the bracket, which is the key in the upper right below delete. That's looks like a little square bracket. And so there's 2 brackets facing each other, and I can move stuff left and right by using those brackets. So that's a fast way to do it. you don't have to do it that way. You can just use tab. So if I hit delete and then tab, that's how I can indent one section. So I need to indent this whole section. If I want to just do it without selecting everything, I can just go to the beginning of each line and hit tab to move it over. Okay, so I've changed the content a lot. So let's take a look at it. So now I have this main container where I can style the whole, all of my content together. I have the header section that's just the top of the page that I can style separately. I have the main section, which is the main content of my page. And then I have that content in here with my links and all the stuff in here. Okay. So now we're going to add some CSS. Let's pause for a second, make sure everybody is up to date with that. I'm going to stop the recording because I want